Welcome to another edition of the Tojo Fitness Podcast for all things food and health related.
Yes, today we are covering the subject of carbohydrates, one of the three macros which are the dietary building blocks of our food.
You know these as protein, as fat and as carbohydrates. As last week we dealt with protein, the importance of getting protein in your diet to build big muscles or just to repair tissue that's got damaged. And today we're talking about carbohydrates, which are your primary food source, your primary fuel source, should I say. They're the fuel to keep you going throughout the day. And in actual fact, they are the only fuel source that your brain can easily use.
Yeah, so when your body is engaged in exercise or in physical activity throughout the day, it prefers the fuel source of carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates can either be slow releasing or fast releasing.
That's right. So we have carbohydrates which are fast releasing. We all know these. We see the effect on children when we give them a bunch of Smarties and they down 2 tubes of Smarties and they're bouncing off the ceiling.
Or Haribo.
Anything like that, especially on an empty stomach, they are in trouble. And that's because they are fast releasing carbohydrates. So what happens is all the energy that's stored up in there in a big whop hits their system and they're full of energy, but then 5 minutes later, or actually about half an hour later, they crash out. Those things are white, normally sweet, they're highly addictive, they give you a big sugar rush, followed by a big sugar crash. And then, of course, what do? Well, you reach out because you need more sugar. And so you start off in the morning perhaps with your Cocoa Pops and get a big sugar hit. And then after that, after about an hour, you're tired again. You feel lethargic, so you get yourself a coffee on the way to work and you put 3 sugars in it. You get another sugar hit. And about half an hour later, you're feeling a bit tired and a bit depressed. And so you reach for the Krispy Kreme as the salesman comes around your office perhaps. And then you get yet another sugar hit. And all the time this is happening, you're getting sugar spikes, which actually aren't very helpful for you, are actually incredibly damaging to your body. We call those simple sugars, and they're one extreme version of carbohydrates.
So on the flip side of that, there's also what's known as slow-releasing carbohydrates, which are your staple in your diet if you're going to be engaged in exercise.
Sure.
So, for example, your slow-releasing carbohydrates are things that are brown. So, for example, or oats. Oats are known as slow-releasing carbohydrates. Brown bread, brown pita breads, things that are harder to eat. For example,
generally, the things that you struggle to eat fast, the things that make you feel full up for longer, the things that are a little less appetizing. Here's the thing. If you want to know if a carbohydrate is fast or slow, think to yourself, would my child eat it? If your child is not interested in it, it's probably better for you and is a slow carbohydrate.
That's a good way to measure.
Before we talk about the different types and actually drill down on this, I want to talk about the Glycemic Index. We've talked a little bit about this on some of our 60-second nutrition, but this is something which we need to talk a little bit about more now. Now, we've talked about fast carbs and slow carbs. And fast carbs and slow carbs are all to do with how fast the sugar that's in them hits your system. Now, your body uses pretty much exclusively, at the final analysis, it uses sugar as its energy source. Now, some of those sugars in what we call fast carbs, those sugars are very simple, they're already processed, they're there, you can just use them. In more slow-releasing carbs, those sugars are bound up and are much a part of other things. So your body has to work harder to release them. It's a little bit like going to the petrol station and you can put 4-star in your car. That ages me, doesn't it? You can put unleaded in your car and your car will run straight away. That's like simple sugars. Or you can go and get crude oil. Now, crude oil takes a lot more processing, and that's more like fibrous or starchy, slow carbs. Now, here's the thing. Your body loves slow carbs. It prefers slow carbs because by slowing the process down, we get a slow, steady release of energy. The fast carbohydrates are a little bit like, to go back to the car illustration, hitting the NOS button, getting a turbo boost of energy, and then your wheels fall off half an hour later. So as Joe said, these sort of carbs, if you've got one extreme, you've got fibrous carbs. They're hard to eat. They take a bit of chewing. Things like pulses, barley, porridge oats, chickpeas, vegetables, particularly green veg, cruciferous vegetables, beans, whole wheat stuff. That it takes more to eat them. So they're fibrous carbs, but they're going to give you a slow and steady release of energy during the day. You won't get crashes and you won't get sugar spikes. Then you got these mid-range carbohydrates we call the starchy carbohydrates. They're things like sweet potatoes, brown rice, Weetabix, banana, chapatis.
Oh, chapatis.
That sort of stuff. Just the general, a bit of brown pasta perhaps.
Noodles.
Yeah, noodles are great. Whole wheat noodles particularly. And then you go up to the faster carbs, the simple sugars, which are obviously sugar, white bread, donuts, fizzy drinks, crisps, and surprisingly, fruit juice is in there as well. Now, this is all part of the GI scale. And the GI scale is a way scientists describe how fast the carbohydrates release their sugars. It's a scale that runs from a 1 to a 100. And if you talk about something like simple sugar, just table sugar, that releases its energy. It comes in at a number 100 on the scale. As soon as it hits your system, bang, you've got some energy there. And then you've got other things like barley, which is very, very low on the GI scale. I think barley is somewhere down about 27 or something like that on the GI scale. So it's going to release very, very slowly. So when we talk about the GI scale, all we're saying is it's a scale of how fast energy is released. And most of the time, most of our energy comes somewhere in this mid-range between the 50 to 70 range, the sort of starchy carbohydrates.
So how much carbohydrates should we have in our diet? Because there's loads and loads of different research of how much percentage you need, etc., etc. And we're just going to break this down a little bit more simply for you.
Yes, simple is really helpful. You know, if you're on a diet, there's so many diets out there now, the keto diet. And carbs have come in for a lot of beating recently. Carbs, yes, if you're trying to lose fat, then it makes sense to cut down on carbs. We tend to overeat carbs. Right? Our generation, we don't do much, we don't burn much energy, but we're taking on a huge amount of energy in the way of carbohydrates, particularly in these simple fast carbohydrates. And what happens there is that the stuff which we can't immediately burn, our body is very clever and puts it into storage and turns it into fat.
This is the thing, goes into fat storage. So imagine self-storage. And all those carbohydrates that you eat, if you don't use, there's a surplus of them. And that surplus gets put into the big yellow storage building, which are your fat stores. So this is why when we say if you are wanting to lose fat, just reducing back those carbohydrates, just enough to what your body needs for fuel, that's going to benefit you.
Sure, if you want to stay about stable, then you want as much carbohydrates as you're going to burn for energy that day. If you want to lose some fat, then you eat less carbohydrates than you need in energy that day. And your body will go and take some of those carbohydrates out of storage. The big yellow container will become a little bit thinner, which is a wonderful thing about our bodies, is that when we take fat out of storage, our body shrinks. and our body will then burn those carbohydrates. So carbohydrate manipulation is really important. And the thing is that we tend to eat far too much. So how do I know how much to eat? And there's a very simple method to work this out without having to work out calories. If you want to stay about roughly stable, first rule is to eat mainly starchy, fibrous, slow carbohydrates. Things like veggies, pulses, whole wheat, porridge, brown rice, Weetabix, sweet potato, banana, that sort of stuff, okay? How much you eat, very, very simple. Just make a fist. You might like to do it now. Just make a fist. And everybody's fists are different sizes because it's according to the size of your body. And if you have in your 3 main meals, breakfast and lunchtime and tea time, a fist-sized portion of carbohydrates, starchy or fibrous carbohydrates, that's going to be enough to give you enough energy to get through the day without probably overloading your system with too much carbohydrates that then has to go into storage. So if you look at a fist, that's a sort of small potato, perhaps. You know, if you think about a jacket potato, we tend to get a huge jacket potato, which is larger than anybody's fist, other than perhaps Arnold Schwarzenegger's. But look at the size of your fist. So if you're having a jacket potato, that's the size potato you want. It's about the size of 2 Weetabix or a couple of shredded wheat. It's the size of a small portion of pasta. If you think about how we tend to eat pasta in the West, we have a vast plate the size of your head instead of the size of your hand.
Yeah, it's a lot of portion size control, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Which is one of the in our culture, we kind of eat the Italian way, I think.
Yeah.
And it's getting that portion size, so fist size in carbohydrates. And make sure as well, the other food that on your plate, try to make sure they don't touch. That's also kind of a good little...
Yeah, if your plate is too crowded, well, don't go and buy bigger plates, but just
social distance your food, people.
Amen.
Social distance your food.
So that's going to give you probably the right amount of carbohydrates if you're reasonably active. If you're not active, then you probably only need that carbohydrates in the morning and for lunchtime. If you're trying to lose weight, then just cut out those starchy carbs in the evening. So you have a fist size in the morning, and that gives you your energy for the morning. A fist size at lunchtime, that gives you your energy for lunch. In the evening, not so much of a problem. You're going to be sleeping anyway. So that's a good way of measuring that out. Now, it's interesting, Joe, you mentioned about the Italian way of eating. And of course, Italians, the one thing about Italians is that proper traditional Italian families, we think of them as having piles of pasta and a little bit of sauce on the top. But in reality, they actually eat a smaller amount of pasta and eat a lot of vegetables. So here's the saving grace of this method, is you can also have a fist size of vegetables. Each of the 3 big meals, you want to have a fist size of starchy or fibrous carbohydrates, and you want to have a fist size of fruit or veg. So let's go back to breakfast.
Yeah.
Breakfast, you've got your...
best meal of the day.
2 Weetabix.
Yes.
You've got perhaps 40 grams of porridge oats, something like that. That's probably about a fist size. Perhaps 30 grams of porridge oats.
Yeah, about 30 grams.
Is a fist size of porridge oats. Now you need a fist size of vegetables or fruit.
Don't think I'll have vegetables with breakfast though.
Nobody wants to eat broccoli for breakfast.
No,
So
I'll probably opt for the fruit.
So what are your options? A fist size, that would be a grapefruit.
Yeah.
That would be
mango.
A mango. It might be a half a dozen strawberries and 20 blueberries. That would be a great suggestion.
Yes.
It might be a banana. So now you've got your carbohydrates. You've got the 2 different sorts of carbohydrates here. Loads of energy there, but it's really, really usable. Let's go to lunch. So for lunch, you've got your piece of chicken. We dealt with protein last week. And you've got a small jacket potato there. Now, what are you going to add with that? Now, you're probably going to add your vegetables there. So you're going to have a fist-size portion of vegetables. Easy to do. Vegetables use practically no calories. It's very hard to get fat on vegetables. Knock yourself out. So there's your fist size. In the evening meal, same sort of principle, same sort of process. That's how much. Let's talk about what we do, because I know there's a lot of people on here listening to us now who are avid gym goers. Perhaps they're bodybuilders, perhaps they are runners or something like that. How do we use carbohydrates in a pre-workout?
Yeah. So before you come to actually engage into your workout, obviously it's been pre-arranged surely into your diet. About an hour to 2 hours before you hit the gym or before you engage in physical activity such as running or sports, etc., you want to pick something off of the glycemic index, which is in the medium to low range. So you're not going to go for simple sugars. Why? Because by the time you hit the gym in 1 to 2 hours time, they've already been burnt up. They're not available to you. They're like out of service. So we need to make sure that we take on some slow releasing carbs. So by the time you actually get to that run, by the time you get to that football match, by the time you get to the gym and you start lifting that weight, your carbohydrates are ready to fuel.
That's a really good point, because this is a mistake so many people make is, let's say you're going to be playing in a football match and you might have a meal a couple of hours before that football match and you're onboarding a fist size of slow release carbohydrates. Now that's put you in a really, really good position for the football match. But then just before the match starts, or perhaps half an hour before, you suddenly think, oh my gosh, I'm going to expend a lot of energy, and you go for the Lucozade. So you go for the high energy drink. Now the problem is, what happens is you take that, it gives you a sudden sugar rush, and by halfway through the first half, you've crashed out. Your legs feel as heavy as anything. And we talk to clients, a lot of our clients who are athletes, they have this problem. And we talk to them about it and we find, well, dude, you're just before you go to the gym is not the time to eat a Mars bar. Just before you go to the gym is not a time to onboard simple sugars. Now, half time during the football match, that would be the time to take on board your simple sugars, but not just before. You want those starchy fibrous carbs to be slow releasing throughout that first half. In the same, if you're having a gym workout, you don't want to be halfway through your gym workout and then run out of energy. And you shouldn't run out of energy if you've stocked the larder well with your fibrous carbs. An hour, perhaps, you can get up to about an hour. Much more than an hour, your body is going to be transferring blood into your stomach and not into your muscles, so it's gonna have diminishing returns. So let's say we're going to the gym in mid-morning. We will have for breakfast, 2 hours before, we'll have a fist size of porridge, and then perhaps an hour and 15 minutes before we go, we'll have a fist size of fruit. So we've got onboarded a whole bunch of essential nutrients, but then by the time we get to the gym, our body is well stocked with carbohydrates, well digested carbohydrates, and our stomach isn't bloated.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about post-workout. So what happens after you run, after your football match, after you've been to the gym? You have this magical window of about a couple of hours after you've finished where your body is able to deal with these simple sugars, which you are allowed at that point, better.
This is the one time when simple sugars come into their own. This is why God invented donuts. Simple sugars are for after the workout. You have this window of opportunity whereby your muscles are depleted in glycogen. Your muscles are screaming out for sugar. And if you now take simple sugars on board, your body will shuttle those simple sugars to your muscles, you'll recover in double quick time, and you'll be ready for the rest of the day. That's the time to onboard these simple sugars. Now, at other times, those simple sugars will cause you problems. But right now, after you've worked out, so after we've worked out, our protein shake after we work out normally has, for my protein shake, I put simple sugars in there. I put dextrose a couple of scoops of dextrose in my protein shake to give me that sugar hit I need. Other people might have a sports drink. Some people eat gummy bears. You can eat thick-skinned fruit. Things like oranges are great after a workout. Grapefruit is great after a workout.
Yeah.
So all these things you can shuttle in the simple sugars. You're not going to get fat. You're going to recover really fast.
But just don't go past this window. Don't get used to the sugars so much that you're like, oh, I'm just going to carry on. And one of the things that you'll find is when you start limiting your sugar intake at the beginning, because they're so addictive, it's almost like this cold turkey syndrome that you have to go through. You know, your body will start acting up. It will give you the headaches.
It's like a child that you suddenly take away their sweets.
Yeah, it's like, almost like stopping smoking. Yeah. Almost. It's just as addictive. Sugar is just as addictive if someone's on drugs or smoking or anything like that. The body will act up. Now, after a while, give it about 3 weeks, I'd say, 3 weeks to a month of limiting these sugars down, your body will adjust. And also your taste buds will adjust. It won't want that sugar anymore. And when you do have it, you'll be like, oh, this is weird.
Or you only need a small amount of it.
Yes.
So if you can wean yourself off of the high sugar, you then have a meal, and after the meal you might treat yourself and have a very small sweet dessert.
Yeah.
But that's enough. You don't have to have the vast gelato thing, which is like the Knickerbocker Glory kind of thing. You don't need that. You don't want that.
Substitute. So, for example, come off a full-fat Coke. You know, sometimes we love the fizzy drink. We love the way that fizzy drink feels. Come off a full-fat Coke. First of all, come down to Diet Coke. And then come off of that, come to fizzy water. And there's all these little changes that we can make to actually help the body in its addiction of sugar. So that was a bit of an aside.
That was a good aside, though. I want to deal with something which we're going to do a whole session on later on, but I think is important in understanding why. And one of the things we want to do in these podcasts is give you a peek behind the curtain as to how the body actually works and why these things are important. Because you can read so much on the internet, which is very unhelpful. But if you've got the wisdom and the knowledge of understanding, well, this is how the body works, you're able to see it for what it is. We want to just talk a little bit about how carbohydrates work with insulin. You've obviously heard of insulin. People who are diabetic, they sometimes inject insulin. But insulin is made by the pancreas and it's in all of our bodies. And insulin and sugars have a very, very close relationship. Insulin, if you imagine it like a taxi service, and its job is twofold, really. It has 100 uses, but two big uses as far as our metabolism is concerned. It shuttles sugar to the muscles. So when you've had a workout, after that workout, your muscles are depleted in sugars. They're desperate for sugars. You then eat a handful of gummy bears. Those gummy bears fill your blood up with sugar. Now, what's going to happen? How does that sugar that's in your blood end up getting into your muscles? Well, in comes insulin. And insulin invites the gummy bears into the taxi and drives them into the muscles and causes the muscles to absorb the simple sugar. Now, if your muscles don't need any more sugar, then insulin is driving around with a taxi full of screaming sugar kids. What's it going to do? It's going to drop them off at the nearest fat storage depot it can find. And so insulin will either shuttle sugar to the muscles or it will shuttle sugar to fat storage.
You don't want to say that too many times, that sentence, do you?
It's really hard. I was really concentrating then. So if you haven't, this is why we say if you've worked out, eat simple sugars, because insulin will shuttle sugar to the muscles. If you haven't worked out, don't touch them with a barge pole because the sugar can only go to one place. If your muscles don't need it, it will go to fat storage. Now, the higher the GI, do you remember we talked about the glycemic index? The faster the carbohydrate, the simpler the sugar, the easier it is for them to hail the taxi service.
The quicker the taxi turns up, the quicker the Uber
That's it.
comes.
That's it. So it takes a while. If you eat a bunch of whole wheat bread, it takes a while for the taxi service to turn up. And then the taxi drives very slowly to the destination. If you eat a bunch of simple sugar, the taxi is there in a flash. And before you know it, it's taken them and dumped them off into fat storage. Now, not only is this a problem in the fact that you get fat, but insulin itself becomes a problem. And this is why, the reason why, the best thing you can ever do for your health, possibly the most healthful thing you can ever do, is to cut out sugars. Sugar sucks. Sugar is a killer. And the reason is because your insulin spikes. Now, let's say you're doing this throughout the day. You're getting more and more taxis onto the road. More and more. Now, you know taxi drivers, they're insane. They're lunatics. They're driving all over the road. They're carving up every other car. They're causing problems for everybody else who's on the road, right? So what you've now got is insulin running rampant all over your body. They're taking up the bus lanes. They're taking up the main lanes. They're driving the wrong way up the other side of the road. They're going crazy in your body because there's too much insulin. And each of these taxi cars is bulging with crazy sugar kids that it's trying to find a home for.
Sounds like chaos.
It has a word. It's called diabetes. That's diabetes. That's how it happens. And so if you are able to get rid of those sugar kids, you're able to deal with them so they're not there in the first place. All of a sudden, you only have on the roads the required amount of taxes you need. Everything calms down in your body. Your system maintains an equilibrium. And you can almost every time, type 2 diabetes can be solved, not through medication, but through diet, simply by reducing the simple sugars. It reduces this insulin spike, it gets the taxis off the road, and your body starts working properly. So that's how carbohydrates work with insulin. I think we just need to wind this up now and just bring some take-homes here. A lot of information here, but here's the take home for carbohydrates. How much should I eat? I should eat, for normal maintenance, 3 fist-sized portions a day. What should I eat? I should eat starchy, fibrous carbohydrates mainly. Veg, pulses, barley, whole wheat, chickpeas, porridge, beans, bananas, sweet potatoes, brown rice, Weetabix.
With the
stuff
protein.
Like that. Yeah. I should avoid the fast carbs, white bread, sugar, and so on. The way of seeing it is this. If it's fast, it's probably white in colour, it's probably sweet, and it's probably addictive.
And very, very easy to eat.
Yes.
Yeah.
If it's good for you, if it's a low GI carb, it's probably browner in colour, it's probably tastes savoury, and it's harder to eat. So there's your take-homes, 3 fist-sized portions of good carbs, starchy, fibrous carbs, and avoid the high GI sugary carbs unless you're in a post-workout condition.
So this has been Tojo Fitness talking about carbohydrates. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel,
which is www.youtube.com/Tojo Fitness.
so you don't miss another nutrition podcast. Also, you can follow us on Instagram at Tojo Fit or on Facebook at Tojo Fitness. And if you would like to join our peak nutrition program where we're able to take you on this journey, then please do get in touch.
God bless you. Have a wonderful day, whatever you're doing.
Laters.